Okay, welcome to the second go-to session for week three. This is going to be sort of I don't know what to call it, sort of like a hybrid session. I'll spend most of the time actually talking about other issues rather than the literal assignments that are due this week, because this week is a rare example where the final assignment, or I shouldn't say final assignment, but the assignment that's due at the end of this week on Sunday. It's kind of similar to what you've already been doing up until now. So you'll mostly be using the exact same skills that you learned for the first 2 weeks, and apply to basically a new activity. But there's probably less for me to go over this time. Like this time, you know how to do things. You know how to search for articles online. You know how to use presentation tools. You know how to use Digo if you want. You know how to find images. So yeah, for this assignment, I don't really need to walk students through things like I did for the first two. We will spend some time talking about how, right? It's not like I'm going to ignore it entirely, but it's less complicated to explain, I think. Okay. Oops, let me go back for a second. Oh, I remember what I want to say. Yeah, I'm almost like I only have literally like I think three people's 2.5 assignment to grade. The researching credible connections assignment that you handed in last Tuesday. And as soon as I get with that, I swear I'll turn to the team debates and get those cleared from your FSO board, so they're not so you're not seeing those ugly red exclamation marks telling you that something is late when it isn't. It's just I still need to grade it. I'm just kind of like super anal retentive. That means that I need to like see something through completely until it's finished, or it drives me crazy. So I need to finish the 2.5 grading before I switch to the team debate. By the way, speaking of the team debate, Team C chose Team B, Team Bravo, as the winner. Although I'm sure Team A did a fine job as well, and it must have been a tough choice for Team C. But there's the winner. Can't remember. Team B was a team that had two responses. I want to say that Team C picked the second response as their favorite. Yeah, and as Michael says, both teams did a good job, right? I kind of noticed that just by looking at their statements very quickly. About a week ago or nearly a week ago when they were handed in. So congratulations. The good news is your prize is absolutely nothing. There's no big money. There's no new car. There's no trip to Hawaii. There's just the satisfaction in knowing that your team won, and probably it will result in a decent grade. I'll have to look at Team B's response with more care than I did the other day, but I'm guessing that if they were the winner, they probably did a pretty good job. Okay, so Tuesday we were talking about digital citizenship, the nine different elements, the nine different things that make up digital citizenship. So, I can't speak today. Digital citizenship, and now I just want to slow things down and talk about kind of the larger picture of what not just what this class is about, but what digital citizenship really kind of implies. First, as we've been stressing all month, that yeah, it refers to more than just tools and behavior. Sometimes I think people come into this course and they know that okay, we'll learn about I don't know how to use different tools, or we'll be introduced to different cool apps or software tools that we can make use of. And people generally know that it has something to do with behavior. Like we shouldn't just go online and I don't know say insulting things because a that's not very nice, and b in 2014 you better be careful what you say online because it could come back to haunt you. People aren't aware of just what happens when they post to Facebook or they tweet. You're even getting cases where if you're applying for a job, employers can look up your online history and see if you kind of align with their values or not. Most people, I think, generally get that, or if they don't get it, they somehow get the wake up call eventually. They'll overshare on a social media platform and learn not to do that. They'll learn, I don't know, to be careful what they say if they're not posting anonymously, and so on. But I think it goes even beyond that. The basics of netiquette, right? We learned that term in our week one assignment. I think it goes beyond basic behavior principles and knowledge of tools, and that's what I'd like to kind of focus on a little bit. Because digital literacy also means all this, right? Information literacy, the ability to process information, tech literacy, data literacy, statistical literacy, visual literacy. It's difficult to explain, but we're forced to be more visual people now. We may not be skilled as much as some people are, but right. I mean, we're dealing with multimedia forms, so sound, visuals, text in ways that we didn't before. I mean, sure, before we got some of those elements in a traditional textbook, but now we're dealing with it all the time. So it means when I give a presentation for you, like I do have to kind of try to make things look pretty. By the way, I didn't do a very good job of that on Tuesday. That presentation was all text. But if you've been attending the sessions, you'll know that most of my presentations kind of look like this one. I make sure that they're visuals. I try to put some effort, even though I'm not a graphic design person, into how things look. So yeah, we got all these different types of literacies. And I'd like to focus on this one in purplish here. I don't know if that's purple or if that's what's that color that's kind of between pink and I don't know. But critical reasoning, okay? Critical thinking. Magenta, yeah, that'll work. Magenta. Yeah, critical thinking is something we value in this class. So, for example, you've already been dealing with this in the last assignment, right? The ability to determine whether information is trustworthy or not. You did that with articles that you found. We were also exploring it earlier in the week when we were just talking about how do we distinguish between fact and fiction when we go online, right? It's not that critical thinking didn't exist before, and some people would even argue, I don't agree by the way, but some people would argue that especially young people don't have the critical thinking skills that they used to, but I don't know if that's true or not. But either way, I think it's important still to develop those skills because you need them more than ever right now in 2014. It's not a good thing to be participating in technology in all of its forms without kind of carefully considering what you're coming across. One of the tips to helping out with critical thinking is learning to slow down. Because the digital age kind of encourages quick digestion of information. We have so little patience. You know, how many people are like me? Where I'm an English person, right? I studied. That was my major in college, so I like to read. But how many of you are like me? When you hit a website that is just a wall of text, like it's just paragraphs of words on the page, you just look at it and go, "Ugh, I don't want to deal with this," and you'll go to some other site because you don't really want you don't want to read through that much. So I mean, and part of it's natural because I don't think online materials are the same thing as like books that we pick up and read. But still, there is something about the digital age that just encourages quick digestion. Like we don't want to sit down, we want to browse, we don't want to deal with things in depth. Some of that's natural, but some of it has problems when it leads to not being able to critically examine things. I think I mentioned this back in week one, if you'll remember. I kind of made jokes about. Remember, I explained my digital identity as being a digital adapter. I'm someone who's kind of between worlds because I'm 43. So on the one hand, I'm very comfortable with technology. On the other hand, I'm not as familiar as I don't pick up things as quickly as young people do. And I think I made the joking reference to things I remember from my time growing up and how they've changed so much just in the past 20, 30 years. So I showed what portable music looked like 30 years ago with those giant Walkmans that were the size of like a small brick. And now, of course, we have all these tiny, sleek MP3 players. I think I showed the joke of what cell phones looked like in the early 90s. Again, these giant like football-sized things that you have to hold up to your ear. And now we have all these tiny little smartphones. But I believe it was in that session I also made kind of a joking reference to speed, because I'm old enough to remember the 1970s were frozen dinners. Remember, I joked that they took like 40 minutes to cook, but you were so excited about them, even though they tasted like garbage, you'd wait those 40 minutes. But now we have microwaves. And I might have also referenced internet. That back in the day, like in the early 90s when we had 14.4 modems, like you would sit there and wait for a single photo to appear on the screen. It might take 5 minutes for it to appear, but you waited because you didn't know anything better. But as computer processing power has increased, since methods of delivering information through cable and wireless have increased, things just have sped up. And in a way, that's great. I mean, who wants to sit around waiting for, I don't know, a song to download or a movie to start streaming? We want things on demand. The kind of negative side of that is that when things get so sped up, it has this impact on your psyche. You'll just have to trust me on this. That it really kind of it sort of conditions you to expect things to always be delivered that quickly, which in some ways is great, but it's not so great when it comes to things like critical examination or critical thinking. For that kind of activity, we sort of need to slow down. Because if we slow down, then we can access several information types and points of view before we reach a conclusion, which is the final point here I make on this slide. So yeah, I mean, I understand speed, 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 but occasionally let's slow down and think things through. It can be as big as determining whether an article is trustworthy or not. It could be as something as simple as really thinking, taking the extra 10 seconds to decide, is this something I want to share on Facebook or not? Maybe this is too personal, or maybe I think I'm being tremendously funny, but it's gonna hit other people kind of awkwardly, right? So slow down. Issues of digital citizenship also involve our role globally, and along with that social responsibility. The way I like to look at it is kind of until, let's say, very recently, we had access to technology, but it was more like an analog world. And analog, of course, predates digital, but also in this metaphor, analog kind of represents local. Um, that we were most interested in what was immediately around us, our friends, our family, our community, and it was kind of difficult to think bigger than that. But because of the digital access we all now have, which we talked a bit about last class, in the digital world, things are much much more global. I think last class we all shared, maybe it was sometime last week, we shared how many Facebook friends we had. Remember, I had a pathetically low amount, like 54 or something, and you guys had totals of like 800 or 2,000, and which is impossible because there's no way you could have that many friends. But do you guys know people? Maybe you've never met them, but you have friends, whether they're Facebook friends or people that you've communicated with or people that you've played games with online that come from other countries. Like, I don't know, you're playing Call of Duty and the guy you're playing with is from Scotland or India. Okay, so I'm already getting some positives from the chat room, right? Like, that's pretty cool. I mean, it was really cool, like, again, about 20 years ago when these nascent technologies appeared, like America Online, and it just seemed so incredible that you could talk to somebody from around the world. I think we're more used to it in that sense. But the good thing, and I mean this genuinely, the good thing is that technology does have this ability to bring people together, and in a way that's not corny, and in a way that's become so commonplace that people sort of take it for granted. But in a way that's sort of good, because nobody really blinks their eye anymore at someone who's from another country or someone who speaks a different language, and I think that's a good thing, right? I mean, you can call me whatever you want, to Mr. Positive or Mr. Hippie, even though I wouldn't describe myself as such. But I really do like the power that things like social media can bring. And one of your videos this week even kind of dealt with that issue, more in a political sense, or a coming together of people to make things happen. But still, I think even in very general terms, I'm amazed with how young people, even very very young people like my children, they're just more aware of. I mean, they're less surprised by the diversity that's out there, and the ability for people to communicate. And I do think that technology has something to do with that, and that connects with digital citizenship, by the way. Right? We're not just becoming literally technologically citizens, we're also becoming citizens in the larger, more global sense. Actually, I will point out one flaw. I think it's almost reductionist to compare like a digital world now to an analog world of the past. We have an interesting thing that's going on now where it's almost both global and local. I mean, yes, there's this increased sense of possibility and connections and understanding of different cultures, of different people, of different perspectives that I think is enhanced by technology. On the other hand, we're going through this interesting phase, I'm sure you guys have noticed, where there's almost a more intense emphasis on local issues, right? Like really helping out in the community, or making improvements, or making things happen, or or rebuilding efforts. So actually, I would say that today's world is a weird sort of hybrid between the two, which is also very cool. Okay, and just to repeat what I kind of echoed earlier, that this isn't just about learning how to use digital tools. Sure, we could offer a course that teaches you how to use iMovie or teaches you how to use Keynote. And to a certain degree, we do introduce some tools like Digo. But really, what's more important is being able to create with tools, not just learn how to use them. I mean, a really, really kind of simplistic comparison, because I don't think anybody thinks of Microsoft Word as this amazing program, right? It seems kind of like an old school program that we open up to write essays. But it would be the difference between knowing how to use the various functions in Microsoft Word and actually using Word to create something that's robust or interesting, right? I mean, there's one thing between knowing how to use a tool literally and being able to create with it. So one of the questions I have for the people present here is like, what are some of the things that you've created using digital tools? And hopefully you have more impressive examples than like using Microsoft Word to type up a paper or something like that. Do we have people who regularly use tools to create things? Maybe you don't even think about it. Maybe the tools are so natural to you that it's just like part of your life. You don't even think about it. Yeah, what kind of things do you guys create? Okay, Michael says graphic design. Yeah, there's a great example, right? I mean, I'm no graphic design expert, and graphic design is a field that's existed for a long, long time. But yeah, nowadays you better know. I don't know. What are the main programs in your field, Michael? Photoshop, Illustrator. You should know how to not only be able to hopefully take photos, but also be able to create, design your own images, or to be able to manipulate images, but not necessarily manipulate like in an evil sense, but to be able to do things with image and text. By the way, um, okay, Angelica's also in graphic design. Fonts, yeah, I was just going to say that even aside from the visual aspect, right there's also the interaction of visuals and text in a pleasing way, and logos, which you mentioned, like that's a big thing. That's an important area, right? I mean, it really takes a skillful team to create a logo that functions well for a company. Okay, so yeah, those are great examples. So just remember that when you're done with this course, even if you're not a graphic designer, maybe you're heading into music production. Maybe again, it's more about just learning tools and software. It's also being able to create with those tools. It also means being a socially conscious citizen, all that stuff. Because after all, behind every screen is literally code. Okay, I don't code anything. I don't know how to program anything to save my life. But I mean, even this PowerPoint presentation, like someone had to build that software program. Every time you go online and view something, behind what you're viewing is code, right? So I think that's kind of common sense. People just sort of know that. But again, I mean, these things wouldn't exist if people weren't using digital tools to create something unique. And in turn, you can kind of use what they've created to create your own things. Yeah, the great thing about the 21st century is it's very much a sharing community. Not just in the obvious sense like we share things on Facebook, but that we create things and share it with others. Okay, but here's where I'll get into like the soapbox portion of the presentation. I'm going to make an argument that traditional skills are still valuable, though, because here's what happens. Sometimes students will come into Full Sail, especially Full Sail, because it's such a progressive sort of advanced university in terms of embracing technology, in terms of recognizing the importance of technology. So you'll get students. They don't have to be computer students. They can be music production people. They can be film students. They can be graphic designers, and they'll tell you things like, "Oh, writing isn't really important anymore. Nobody cares about that. It's all texting. It's all posting. It's all tweeting, or being able to communicate face to face. Yeah, it's a little bit important, but it can't be that important. I mean, we have other ways to exchange information." So I'm going to try to make my case that these skills still do have a point. So, for example, reading and writing. Do you? I mean, don't give me, pardon my French, but don't give me like BS. Do you guys think that these things are still important, reading and writing, and why? Or do you just think it's important because it sounds nice to say that it's important? Do any of you want to make the case that writing? Because here's the thing: is soon say that writing is dying, right? Writing is dying out. That there's no need to write in paragraphs and full sentences when all we do is tweet and post, and that works good enough for me. So I'm not sure why we need to write so much anymore or read books. So where do you guys stand on this? Do reading and writing still have their place, and why? You can use the chat, or you can raise your hand to come up with an answer. Nobody ever chooses the to raise their hand. I don't know why. No thoughts on that? Angelic says tweeting and texting gives you limited communication. Okay, yeah, right. Tweeting is limited to what is it, 140 characters or something, and texting just isn't by design built for that kind of space. Jordan says writing is how you're able to read and speak proper English, so you needed writing anyway. Jordan says 160. I don't know what that means. Oh, is that the number of characters for a tweet? I thought it was like 140 or something. I don't know. I don't tweet. Joe says it should be important. It's what keeps our language alive. You can't really express yourself properly. Okay, good. I mean, I just hope that you're all sincere in what you say. Because I really do get, you get students who say, well, who cares about grammar? It's texting, as long as my point comes across, that's all that's important. Or, as long as my voice gets heard, who cares what form it's in? And I don't push for reading and writing because I'm trying to convert people into little English majors. That's not my design at all. I don't really have any sort of secret agenda here. I just think that a variety of what you guys said is kind of my answer. That a lot of these forums don't give you the time and space to express things fully, and there still are situations where you do need to communicate a bit more fully than you would in a text or a tweet or a Facebook post, right? It's not that those forums are bad. I love some of those forums as well. But there are still instances where you'll need to kind of communicate quite a bit of information. And one of the great things about writing, for instance, is that it has this magic ability to stop time. So even if you want to say, "Wow, I could just explain it over the phone," or I could, I could Skype. Yeah, you could, but there's something about creating the time and space to put your thoughts on the page, edit them if you need to, make sure that it's just right, and then again, this ability to stop time essentially before you send it out. Um, and I think there's also value in, writing forces you in the traditional sense to organize your thoughts. And organizing is always pretty much a pretty good thing. So much of what we text and tweet and post is done on the fly without much thought, and there's value in that as well. I mean, it's a very, very kind of visceral form. That's kind of the appeal of Facebook, right? I mean, you put things out there like your status or how you're feeling or what you're watching right now, and then other people immediately have a visceral reaction back. Either I like this, or they type a short comment in response, and that's very cool. I have nothing against that, but I do think there's value in the other kinds of writing as well that require a bit more thought, a bit more planning, a bit more organizing, because those are important things. And reading, the same thing, right? I won't say too much about this. I'm not saying that people have to go out and read Moby Dick or Shakespeare. I'm not arguing for that as well. But if you're in game design, maybe you should read gaming magazines. Whatever your industry is, there should be major publications that are part of your field. Why not read it just out of interest? Because you can learn more about your field. Also, if these are pretty important publications in your field, they're probably written by pretty talented writers. So whether you're aware of it or not, you'll just sort of soak up strong writing skills. Reading and writing go hand in hand. And there still is value in them. So the next time you hear someone say it's 2014, nobody cares about these things, it's not because there are a bunch of old fuddy-duddies out there like me who are trying to protect reading and writing from extinction. No, it's literally that these things aren't going extinct. They might change somewhat, Uh, they might be influenced by things like tweeting and texting, but they're not going to be lost in the way that maybe some people exaggerate. Angelica says there's also something about reading that you just don't get online. Yeah, I mean, again, what I said earlier is important too. Is it's that we don't expect to read the way we do in books or journals when we head online, unless we're just really, really invested with a certain topic that we're willing to put in that extra effort. It has to do with the eye too. The eye just doesn't like looking at screens and reading for a long time. I mean, if it's a tablet and you specifically download an ebook or subscribe to an online magazine where it's kind of designed for you to read in that format, that's a little bit better. But yeah, I don't want to sit in front of my MacBook and read a novel. How about public speaking? Is this still important? Yes, no, maybe so. My guess is you're all going to say yes, but just make sure you're okay. Jordan says yes, but you're being sincere, Jordan. You really think that's important? Um, okay, Michael says yeah, I'm bad at it. It takes practice, and I don't know. I guess I should say I should make a distinction between public speaking, which is more getting up in front of a room and speaking, and face-to-face speaking, which should hopefully be more comfortable for you. I don't know how often you'll necessarily need to do public speaking, but you'll probably need to do face-to-face speaking, right? You might have to speak with a coworker. You might have to report to your boss. So I do think, yeah, maybe I should have made a distinction there between those two different modes. As for public speaking, it takes practice. You get used to it. It used to be, I think I read somewhere that public speaking is like one of people's biggest fears ever. And it's really easy to get over the more that you do it. And the more that you give yourself permission to sort of just, hey, go with it. Let whatever happens, happens. For instance, in my go-to sessions, I'm usually pretty lucid. I like to think, and pretty good at explaining things. But like today, for some reason, I feel a bit more tongue-tied in this session than I usually do. I feel like I'm not explaining things as thoughtfully as I typically do, even though I've given this exact same lecture many times. But hey, that's just part of it, right? It happens. You give yourself permission not to always do things perfectly, but there is at least attention on trying your best to get your ideas to come across. And that's what's important. It's not. I'm not trying to suggest that you need to become this eloquent public speaker. It's more, can you deal with face-to-face communication? Because you know what they say, right? You know what they say about young people. Which, by the way, I disagree with pretty much all these stereotypes. But the stereotype is all those millennials. They don't care about reading. They don't know how to speak face to face because they spend all their time on computers, uh, posting and tweeting and swiping their device screens left and right. That they have no idea how to speak to real live flesh and blood human beings, which I think is completely not true. But um, I do think it's important, yeah, that if you do feel like you're in that category, then you might want to brush up on speaking with people because there will be job interviews, there will be, you know, meetings at your job where you'll have to speak. Logic, reasoning, debate, and argument. I don't mean arguments or debate in the sense that people are ready to kind of strangle each other by the neck over, I don't know, politics or some sort of hotbed issue. I just mean the sort of kind of solid logic that people used to get in high school, but I hear from students that they don't really get it anymore. Like when I was in high school, sophomore year, it was in geometry class. Sometimes you get it in philosophy class in college. But like walking you through the different types of logic, things like syllogisms. But the point was to kind of like toughen up your need to use and your background in logic and reasoning. Yeah, Jordan says he didn't get that in high school. Some things for some reason disappear. Logic disappears. Civics, like an understanding of government and how it works, tends to be used to be a requirement. Like in my parents' generation, when I was in school, it existed, but less so. And now it seems like students don't get it at all. But I like the emphasis on logic and reasoning and debate because, again, if we're kind of critically thinking about things, we can enter into adult discussions on on topics, not even like topics, water cooler topics, or the things that get people angry on Fox News or MSNBC. Or I know I'm just talking about when you need to work things out. Maybe there's a problem at your company that needs to be solved. So a solid foundation of logic and reasoning can go a long way. Um, I do get disturbed at the lack of logic that exists out there now. You tend to see, maybe it's probably not that bad. It's just you get spoiled when you go online and see people, and it could be a forum or discussion board or an ongoing email forwarding that's going on from place to place, and just a tremendous amount of bad logic that exists out there. And finally, the importance of history. Okay. Uh, is history important? People, yeah, I mean, you'll say yes, but I don't know. If I had to agree with people, most of the people complain about, oh, the generations today, they can't do this, they don't know this. I pretty much disagree. I do get a little nervous about history, though. It does seem like people are losing their sense of history. As maybe I'm dead wrong, um, but I was talking about how the speed of information is speeding up people's minds, right? We don't have the patience to slow down. There's another side effect. And by the way, I'm not making this up off the top of my head. I actually read, when I was a graduate student, I read some books on this. Um, but yeah, the with the increased speed of today's, the world we live in, it also leads to a decreased sense of history. Now, why would that be? It's because, think about it. If life is being sped up where we can't wait that extra 2 seconds for something to download, we can't wait for that frozen dinner to finish cooking in 6 minutes in the microwave. It used to take sometimes like 10 seconds for a web page to load when you had to use phone lines and a modem to connect. And now, if like my MacBook Pro, which is connected to high-speed internet, if there's any sort of hiccup at all that delays the loading of a screen, it's like I want to pull my hair out. But one of the byproducts of that increased sense of speed is that we're so obsessed with the now. Now, now, now. Right? I want it now. I want that movie to start streaming now. I want that download to be finished now. I want my dinner to be nuked in the microwave in 4 minutes, not 6 minutes. And all that kind of increased obsession with now, now, now means we're not so interested in then. Okay? I mean, we understand the importance of it in a very general sense, but I do think that people are sort of losing their tether to the past. I mean, they'll understand it. For example, if you're on a car trip through the South and you stop to look at one of those old plantations, yeah, on some level you understand that this is a part of history. Or you come across one of those Civil War battlefields or something like that. But it seems like it's more theoretical than felt, and there's something interesting there. Um, yeah, and as Joseph said, history repeats itself, so it's pretty important to kind of know what happened so um, we don't have that happen again. Michael says that's me recording my speed arts. See, I don't know what that means. That might be something that I'm just not hip to. I don't know what speed arts are. Uh, but yeah, okay. So I think we have, and I'm not, and hopefully we have some people here who can show off. I'm not like a snob. I'm not trying to quiz people. I know that some people have more interest in history, as other people have less interest. But I do get concerned when like people don't know what century the American Civil War took place in. Don't really care if you can't remember the exact years. 1861 to 1865, by the way. But I get a little bit concerned when people can't name the century, right? Or when people aren't sure when World War One occurred. Again, you don't need to know the exact years, but when people say that World War One was in the 1800s or the 1950s, like that's a little bit off. That's so far off that I get a little bit concerned. And not because I insist that people know exact dates and names of things, but I think we should have a general knowledge of history. I mean, there are lots of people I'm shocked that don't know what the Cold War is. They've heard of the Cold War, but they think it's an actual war that must have taken place between the United States and some really really cold country, like Iceland or something. But it's pretty important to understand these big concepts because they help us have a sort of common knowledge, and as Jordan said, it helps us avoid repeating the mistakes that we've made in the past. So yeah, history is also important. Because full digital awareness, that's the real goal here. In the fullest sense of the word, I've kind of repeated several times throughout the month that just as we're citizens in the real world, that we leave our homes and there's kind of an accepted sort of behavior that we're supposed to follow, and that we should hopefully be obtaining a certain minimal level of education so that we can communicate with one another. Like that also applies to the online world. Okay, that hopefully we all have more or less the same starting knowledge, and that we're mostly following the same kind of behavior and awareness. Okay, so there's kind of like a big picture stuff for this session. So I do want to switch gears a little bit and talk about your assignment that's due Sunday. There's no need to walk you through this assignment, but I do kind of just want to stress the major parts of it. Um, this is called the Digital Citizenship Assignment, and what you're going to do is look at an historic event. This time, it's given to you this month. You'll be looking at the Boston Marathon bombing. And you'll be researching this event both shortly before the event, during the event, after the event, if you want, um, and examine the role that digital citizenship played. Okay, so let's real quickly switch the assignment sheet. You can read through most of this on your own, but you can see. I mean, here's the instructions, right? Using the methods you've learned so far in class, research how the concept of digital citizenship was used by individuals, the news media, social networking websites at any level, so national, state, local, uh, after the events of the Boston Marathon bombing. I extended. I mean, you could talk about how they were used shortly before, during, or after. But the basic thing is to look at the Boston Marathon as an event, and examine the way that digital citizenship and digital tools were used to sort of communicate information about that time. So yeah, identify and explain how concepts or elements of digital citizenship were involved, how digital tools were used, and how you feel they impacted the aftermath of this tragic event. Okay, and again, you'll use a presentation tool. It's important to make sure that you discuss both positive and negative effects of tools and technologies used during the event. And you'll support your presentation with at least four credible sources that you've conducted. And you should be experts about this now because you've already gone out and done and completed an activity where you had to find credible sources, or at least articles that you examined in terms of credibility. So you should now know how to go out and find credible sources. And you can use Deagle to help collect your research. So I don't think the assignment is terribly difficult. Like, you guys know how to use Deagle, you know how to go out and find information. You should be able to determine whether that information is credible enough to use. So your job is really to look at these issues we've been talking about all month, and specifically this week. So think of the different elements of digital citizenship. That's a good way to think about it as well. Remember all the stuff we talked about last time. So digital access, digital security, so on. You can think about it from those perspectives, or you can just think of the larger kind of discussion we've been having all month long, um, about the way that digital citizenship plays kind of a role in 2014. Right? So your job is really to discuss digital citizenship and the role that digital tools played in the Boston Marathon bombing. Um, so what does this mean exactly? For instance, you could look at something like I don't know. I don't want to reveal too much because it's your job to find out these things that I don't. But perhaps there was a community that created a website to help out the people in the aftermath of the bombing, right? And So what would that be an example of in terms of digital citizenship? Or maybe you might want to focus on something negative, like maybe people were taking advantage of the situation, or maybe certain pieces of information that were leaked via tweets turned out to be completely inaccurate. So it's really asking you to kind of look at the event, but from the perspective of digital citizenship. And you're kind of getting a dry run at this already with your DGL cold case discussion. Remember where you have to get in your time capsule and go back to the 1920s and imagine the role that digital tools and technologies could have played in that event. Here you're kind of doing a similar thing. You're just doing it with a real world scenario. Okay, one that happened a little bit over a year ago in Boston. So that's kind of why I'm not really walking you through the assignment because you kind of know what to do at this point. So as usual, I always recommend that you look at the rubric. So for example, you'll get the full or almost the full 30 points if your presentation includes a detailed explanation about how digital citizenship applied during this event. That you discussed both positive and negative issues that occurred during the event, right? Um, you'll get points for making sure that you used multiple sources to back up your statements. And then the rest is for more basic stuff. Did the presentation effectively showcase the required information? And I should say here too that again you have all these tools available for you. Most people choose presentation software. They'll choose PowerPoint, Keynote, Prezi. Sometimes people will use a blogging tool. Occasionally, people have even used Microsoft Word because an essay could actually work for this assignment. I tend to steer people away from that unless they're super confident in their writing abilities or they really believe that the essay form is a strong form to use. But I have had people turn in, like, 5 paragraph essays that explore this issue. Jordan mentions iMovie. That's another fine tool to use. So just pick a presentation tool that's best for you. Um, by the way, I really did have one terrific essay that came in last term. So even though he didn't use any visuals, he was hitting all these points here, right? He was talking about digital citizenship. He was talking about positive and negatives that had happened. He backed up all of his statements that he wanted to make with sources. But most people, yeah, they choose one of the familiar sort of presentation tools. Um, and I forgot to open this one, but you also have your frequently asked questions tool. Okay, so it covers a lot of the most common questions. And I hope you guys do look through these documents because sometimes I get concerned because you do have so much information at your fingertips, but if you don't take the time to read it, that's what it's there for. Okay, we're almost done. So yeah, you're going to look at the Boston Marathon bombing and sort of kind of examine it from a larger perspective, okay, of the very things we've been talking about this month. Here's some sort of tips and tricks. I mean, you can organize information any way that you want. Oops. But if you're feeling a little bit lost, I do have this screen for you, so you can take a screenshot, or you can watch it later and just pause on this slide, whatever you want to do. But yeah, probably have some sort of overview paragraph. It doesn't matter whether you're using PowerPoint or you're just writing an essay using Microsoft Word or you're using iMovie. That probably some sort of introduction serves well. It's a little bit awkward to see a student's discussion of the Boston Marathon bombing and the very first piece of information it jumps right in the middle of things. So, some sort of introduction overview paragraph that, I don't know, perhaps explains in general what event we're talking about and why it's important. And next, organize your presentation perhaps around key points you wish to make. I should add that some students will use even the important aspects of the 9 elements of digital citizenship. Not all of them are going to apply necessarily. I'm not sure how well, for example, digital commerce would apply to this event, but okay. So anyway, either key points that you wish to make, or again, maybe certain of those 9 elements of digital citizenship, and build your presentation around those. Okay, so I mean, think of it. It's almost like an essay. Introduction. maybe three, four, five key points you want to make about this event and the way in which digital citizenship played a role. Okay, those are almost like separate body paragraphs within an essay. Okay, so like an introduction, separate key points you want to make, and just make sure that when you're making these points, that at times they're backed up by credible sources. Okay, and how you use those sources is up to you. Some people find ways to briefly quote from them within the presentation. Some people just, present the information in their own words, but then list the source so that we know that this information came from such and such place. You won't really learn the specifics of quoting and citation until probably month 4 if you get me again for English class. But for now, you just have to know that somewhere, somehow, when you're making the points, we need to know kind of where it's coming from. Okay. Again, make sure that you're relying on information that does come from credible sources. Fourth, it's not a requirement, okay? I can't take off points if you don't do it. But yeah, feel free to spice up your presentation with AP images. You know how to do that now. You know how to find images. You know how to include the AP reference number. Again, it's not required, but why not use the tools? Plus, my presentation has lots of images and visuals to kind of keep your interest. So maybe yours should too. Again, make sure to discuss both positives and negatives somewhere, especially the negatives in your presentation. Students often forget this part and they lose a couple points for not doing so. Just about any event that occurs nowadays is going to have something negative that occurred, either in terms of digital citizenship or digital tools, right? People tweeting out the wrong information, people taking advantage of this situation. The news media getting things wrong because they didn't fully investigate, kind of like that TED Talk where that guy said about how verifying information is a much more difficult task nowadays. And finally, you could bookmark everything in your DGL list and provide the URL. Again, this isn't a requirement for the assignment, but if you're comfortable with DGL and you like using that tool to bookmark things, why not keep on using it? Okay, so any questions? I'm most concerned about maybe the assignment that's due Sunday, because I just think from experience that when we get to this point in week 3, most people sort of are comfortable with the tools now. They kind of know what to do in terms of using images, applying concepts, and so this one required less of a walkthrough. But if you do have questions about that or anything we've gone over in the session or anything about the class as a whole, now is the time to ask it. Or are we all feeling pretty good? Michael says good. Jordan has a question about grading average. Okay, go ahead and ask that. And I'll actually keep recording because there are probably a lot of people maybe who want to know about that. I wonder if you're referring to what you see on your page when you check your grades, maybe the difference between projected grade or I think they call it potential grade, actual grade and grade average. Yeah, let me go back a number of months because I don't want to put up any students' information from this class. Technically, I shouldn't be putting up past students either, but this is so many months ago, I don't think it's going to be a huge problem. So, okay, this is from a long time ago. So let me just click on one student's name on average. And I'm even going to try to block out his information so nobody can see it. Oh, wait, his email address is still showing up. Well, okay. So here you have potential grade and actual grade. I guess that's what you're talking about, right, Jordan? This class is finished, so it's there's really no more potential. Your potential means that's like on the path you're heading. So if it says, for example, a B here, that means that's reasonably what you should finish. It's not a promise that you'll get that grade. So for this class in digital literacy, for example, we still have this Sunday's assignment due. We still have your cold case activity needs to be graded. There's another final project that's due. So there's still, a lot of points on the table. So, but if you just don't do them at all, you won't get a B. There's no chance at a B. You'll probably fail. But it's telling you that, hey, given what you've been doing so far, that's where you're headed. If you keep up the same level of work that you've been doing up until this point, you should get like for example, a B. Doesn't mean that you can't get an A. It doesn't mean that you can't get a C, D, or an F. It just means this is sort of where you're heading. And then your actual grade reflects absolutely where you are right this moment. Okay. Um, Gosh, I don't know. See, I don't want to use Jordan as an example because he doesn't want his information just shined up there. All right. So here's someone who got a B, and all right, that was his potential. He reached his potential. An 81 is a B. It's a low B, but it's a B. So that's the difference. I don't know. Is that answered, or was there something else? Sometimes people get confused because I don't know. I'd have to go into someone's current grade, and I don't want to do that live. I can't remember if the actual grade is typically a lower number that doesn't. I mean, can someone, not just Jordan, but can someone say, does your current potential grade match what's over here? That's what I'm forgetting. Like at this stage in the course, after 3 weeks, if your potential grade is a B, do you see something in the 80s over here, or do you see something lower? I think you see something that matches. Oh, it doesn't match. Okay. Yeah, I'd have to look into someone's grade. I don't want to do that with a current student. Or I'm already kind of breaking the rule by even showing past students because you can get in trouble for sharing people's grades, even from a long time ago, um, in this environment. But yeah. Potential is basically where you're heading, and actual shows your actual total. And if you ever have questions, just let me know. I can answer that in a more specific way. But how other people? Anybody else? Questions? Angelica, Joseph, Michael, or are we all good? Michael, how do you look at your grade? That's a good question because from your end, someone else can probably explain it. Jordan probably knows. For me, I just go to the students icon up here, and then I get all the students' names. But I don't know what you guys do. That's what's frustrating is I don't have a student view. So even though our two sides look almost identical, I don't know where you go. Jordan can probably answer if he wants to take the time. If not, okay, good, Jordan. Activities, then scroll down, go to grades. Okay. Yeah. Okay, good. People helping people. That's awesome. Okay, so if people don't have questions, you're free to go. Just message me questions you might have about the assignment if they appear. Okay, and thanks so much for attending. I'll hang out a little bit to answer questions, but that ends today's session.